So the left tends to say that the right lacks compassion. The right tends to say that the left is unrealistic or naive. But you've actually found in your research something quite different and quite revealing.
Well, so my research on moral foundations theory, which grows out of Richard Schwader's work in anthropology originally, and then it's work I did with my colleagues at yourmorals.org, what we find is that people on the left tend to prioritize issues of care and compassion. That's the number one moral foundation. And then also, everybody cares about fairness, but on the left, especially fairness as equality has a special ring, whereas on the right, equality of outcome is of no importance. Equality of opportunity is important for everybody, but proportionality tends to be more what the right means by fairness. So if do the crime, do the time. If you do something wrong, you need to be punished, is a kind of proportionality. And then the big difference, though, is that people on the social conservatives, not libertarians, but social conservatives, also value group loyalty, respect for authority and tradition, and a sense of sanctity or purity. Again, everybody understands these personally, but the sort of the public philosophy, the governing philosophy of the left is based more and more on care and compassion for the vulnerable, and on the right is based more on sort of group cohesion, protecting the group, make America great, defend our borders, build a wall, restore tradition, those sorts of things. And that's actually great. I mean, it's good. That's like a real yin-yang sort of thing that you want to have. The left tends to drive forward the rights revolutions. I thought that we'd gotten full rights for women over the previous decades. Since the rights revolutions of the '60s, I thought things were going pretty well. But then you learn, well, actually, there was a lot more sexual harassment than we realized, and that's always pushed by the left. But at the same time, the left tends to pursue policies that, at least nowadays, that will pit groups against each other, and that I think can make it more difficult to run institutions nowadays. There are a variety of problems with the way that identity politics is pursued. You have to have identity politics, but there are different formats of it. All I'm saying is, this little portrait of the left and the right, it means that they should be together in one system. You need a yin and a yang pushing in different directions. The problem is that human beings are so good at tribalism, at us versus them, that there's a certain, let's say, parameter setting, a certain level of conflict which is ideal, and if you ramp it up too much, it becomes really destructive. For example, intramural sports competitions. If you have teams at a university and they divide up into sports teams and they play each other, they don't hate each other. A little rivalry is actually good, and it makes them love their in-group more, and it makes them not really hate the out-group more. So a little rivalry is good, it stimulates effort, it's more fun. But if you ramp it up too high, you get English soccer hooligans. You get people who actually want to smash the skulls of the other people with a pipe. And that's where we are in American politics, at least. Again, not for the majority of people, but for those who are really active. It's getting more. There hasn't been much physical violence yet, but we're moving that way.
This tribalism that you talk of, we see it in the data in Australia. You've got more people now identifying as right-wing, self-identifying, and more people identifying as left-wing.
Decline in the middle. Yeah.
And the middle is declining.
Right. That's right.
And yet, your work, again, very powerfully points to the need for us all to understand our shared humanity.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the actually sources of hope that I have, is that these identity-focused movements, I think they were necessary. They're addressing real concerns, and I'm hopeful that now that some of them gotten to such degrees of excess that there's widespread revulsion at them. As Steve Bannon said, he's Trump's advisor, right-wing populist. He basically said, if the more the Democrats talk about identity, the more we win, because most people are members of an identity group, but that doesn't mean that they buy that kind of identity politics. It actually turns off. There are, a lot of black people are turned off by being treated like, you are your race, and same for members of every other identity group. So I think that at some point, the next generation is going to look at all this stuff. And they've been raised, in this country, they're raised with such mixing. My son, so my wife is Korean American. Our kids are visibly biracial. My son goes to a selective school here in New York City where most of the kids are Asian, and they tell all kinds of ethnic jokes, Asian jokes. The Asians make fun. I mean, so they're going to think that the passion, the anger of the older people around these issues is just kind of ridiculous and pointless. So I'm hopeful that at some point it will burn itself out, and either the kids now or their kids at some point will get past it and will be able to actually just work on problems rather than turning it into a quasi-religious issue of where we are absolutely right and you're evil and we're going to destroy you.
Yeah. Before we come to the kids, I recently was talking to a fellow I count a good friend from very much a left-wing perspective. He served in our federal parliament for a long time, and he was talking about this business of identity politics and bemoaning what it had done to his own political movement. Because he said once we were about universalism, our objective was to look after the oppressed, the weak, to ensure that all Australians were treated as Australians, as part of the Australian family. Now we're creating new elites. And in fact, we've moved away from much of our old commitment to justice.
That's right. The basic social psychology here is that we are a tribal species. We're really, really good at doing us versus them, and it takes special conditions to turn that off. And I think the general trend in the late 20th century was very good at turning that off. Now, they had the benefit, our parents or grandparents, they had the benefit of having fought this tremendous war against the ultimate evil, and nothing brings people together like war. So the late 20th century was excellent on this, and I think we're losing touch with that. But the basic social psychology for our tribal species means we need to pay attention every chance we get to highlight commonalities, to say we are the same, we are one, we have these differences, but they are subsumed under larger things we have in common. The more we do that, the more we can address the concerns that many on the left have about exclusion and racism, et cetera. Whereas the more we go down this line of good and evil, one group is good, one group is evil, and this is what many of the intellectual movements in the academy are now about, is students are taught to see everything in terms of binaries. And when you do that, you're playing up our tendency to do binary or black and white or all or nothing thinking, and it doesn't lead to any place good.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.